Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio, coming to you from the Hard Truth Distilling Company studios on this Tuesday. Joined now by the great Mike Decourcy from the Sporting News. Mike, how are you, sir?
I am well. How are you, Jim?
Wonderful. It has just been a great sports fall, and it is continuing. A lot of excitement covering Indiana football, of course, but there's plenty of other things going on. We've got the World Series happening now. I think the Colts might get flexed into a Sunday night game. College basketball is an afterthought as of right now on the Bloomington campus, I think, except for Braylon Mullins making a decision tomorrow, which as soon if he says UCONN, that's going to that along with the success of football is the success of football is kind of tweaking or putting a little twinge on the basketball recruiting side, I think. But I think it's just another way of people that are going to complain to use that as a complaining mechanism.
Well, as I said before, I think there's an understandable component to losing him in that direction. And again, as happens now, I mean, a year ago, you and I talked ad nauseum about Liam McNeely. And he never bounced a ball for the Hoosiers. It's not the same as it used to be. A recruiting defeat is not. It's just not as devastating as it used to be. There can be, like, if you were close on Cooper Flagg. I mean, and I don't think anybody really was except the school that got him. But if you were and you missed, that could be that's a setback, because that's a guy who could change your program only for a year, but he can change your program. But honestly, Jim, with the way the talent development system has deteriorated in the United States over the past decade or so, there just aren't that many of those guys now that can individually change your program. So I don't think that it's worth getting excessively worked up about any one particular recruit, unless maybe he's somebody that grew up on your campus and his father and mother both went there, and then you still manage not to get him. I just don't think that it's as consequential as it used to be for the majority of colleges. There's just too many other ways to acquire talent now. And the talent that is in the high school classes, and I hope this changes at some point, but I think that our talent development system has deteriorated. It's not broken, because we still turn out a lot of really very good basketball players, but the production of that great player has almost ground to a halt. We just don't see those players any longer. And I'm disappointed at that. But as I said, for IU, I'm sure they'd be better off if they get this young man. But if they don't, there are just ways around it. It's more important for IU to build a winning formula with the group they have now than to worry about any one particular high school prospect signing in the fall.
Yeah, I think that it's this kind of an ego thing for a lot of Indiana fans. They want the Indiana kids, but at the end of the day, the only thing that should matter is winning. And it doesn't matter where these guys come from, because there's going to be someone in that spot that's probably going to be just as good, because they're going to be out there. They're going to be available in the portal. They're going to be seasoned already. It might be better off. You may actually be better off a lot of those times. Who knows? And it's just a lot of perception, and especially for Indiana fans. It's just not getting the Indiana kid, which it doesn't. Duke is not made up of North Carolina players. Kansas is not made up of Kansas players. You can go down the line. Kentucky is not made up of Kentucky players. It's just not how it is. They're made up of the best players that they can get to win. So it's more of a fan thing, I think, now in this day and age. But it would be probably nice to have a little bit of both of those. It gives you I don't know what it gives the program, because for someone that's coming from the outside, they don't care if they get a kid from in the state or not.
Well, I think that, look, when Arch came in as head coach 2017, that was a very important component of his drive to elevate IU. It had not been poor under Tom Crean. They won the conference in 2013 and I believe 2016 as well.
Yep.
So it had not been poor, but there was a feeling like that it could be better. And so Arch did a really good job of getting Indiana kids. The problem for Arch was that he did so in a time when Indiana high school basketball probably reached its lowest ebb in the last 30 years. It's just those classes. I mean, he got Trace and he got Romeo, and those were the only really significant players just about that came out of the state during his period as head coach. And so protecting the state's borders didn't help him that much. Now it's back up to where it has been traditionally, where you're producing really high level players again on a fairly regular basis. And so it would be nice to be able to protect that. But I also will say that it's not as important as it was even 7 years ago. Well, like I said, when Arch came in, having a talent base was really beneficial to a program. If you had a talent base, it gave you an advantage. I mean, North Carolina during Dean Smith's days, think about the greatest players that played there. Phil Ford, Rocky Mount, Michael Jordan, Wilmington, James Worthy, Gastonia. They complemented it with other players who were great from other places. Sam Perkins was from upstate New York, et cetera, et cetera. Kenny Smith was a New York kid. But the main guys were Carolina guys. That was a long time ago. It's just different now. They don't have to come. They don't have to come for your state. It really doesn't matter. And in a lot of cases, as I said, if you lose a high school kid, you know there's a chance you can go into the portal and get a Dalton Connect. I mean, I'm not saying that you're going to get one of those every year. He was pretty amazing, but you can get a Lance Jones. Say, I mean, Lance Jones won a lot of games for Purdue last year. If there's no Lance Jones, Purdue's still waiting for their first Final Four since '69. And Lance Jones was just a guy on a okay Southern Illinois team, a not very good Southern Illinois team. He was a very good but not great player on a okay but not even really good Southern Illinois team. And all of a sudden, he hits the biggest shot in Purdue basketball since when? Probably since Rick Mott was playing. So you can't get worked up about this. If you get him, it's nice. If you lose him to Purdue, okay, you got to play him twice a year. But if you lose him to UConn, your worst case scenario is he maybe beats you in the Sweet 16 or Elite 8 or whatever. That's not enough to get worried about.
Yeah, I agree. And if Indiana fans want to look back to the 1987 national championship, there was one guy on that starting rotation that was from Indiana. The rest, Joe Hillman from California. I don't even know where Callaway was from. Kansas, maybe, or that's where he ended up.
Wasn't Callaway from Cincinnati?
Maybe but you had Dean Garrett, Keith Smart on that starters on that team that were transfers in from JUCO. That was not a team. That national championship was not built on Indiana kids. Steve Alford, of course, but other than that, yeah, exactly. But other than that, the other four guys,
yeah,
no, they're from all over the place.
I was right. Rick was from Cincinnati. Rick was from Cincinnati. I remembered that. But I mean, you're 100% right. Hey, Isaiah Thomas was from Chicago. Nobody's turning him down. I mean, you were happy to have him, were you not? I like I said, it would be great for Indiana if they get him, but it's not going to change the direction of your program. 24-25 is going to be a defining season for this team. This is a year that they have to be very good. Now, that doesn't mean you have to make the Final Four. It doesn't mean you have to get the elite, whatever. It doesn't mean that, but you have to be exceptional. You have to be in contention for a Big Ten title. You don't have to win it, but you have to be in the ballpark. I do believe that's important because you have been building and you have put together a roster that looks like it should do well. And you're in a league where there is no Purdue 2024 right now. There's a very good Purdue 2025. There's a very good Michigan State or a very good UCLA. But there's nobody there that you say, we could get them all right and still maybe not catch that team. I don't think there's anybody like that. So this is an important year for the Hoosiers on the court. On the phone, it matters, of course. But on the floor is what, if they can win this year and do well, they can go into the portal next spring and they'll have a lot to sell.
Yeah, teams like Kentucky, Louisville, man, Louisville is going to be a lot tougher than people realize because they brought 13 players in, and that's a team Indiana will possibly play down in the Bahamas. So that's going to be an early, interesting matchup with that. There's going to be some teams down there to watch for this. And I think that's much more important than where Braylon Mullins ends up. And again, UConn is coming off of back-to-back national champions, man. That's a pretty good selling point. It's kind of hard to go again. That's a big old sign that's blinking when you walk in up there to stores. So I'm sure that, and rightfully so, Danny has sent a lot of players to the NBA in the last couple of years off of these rosters as well. That is not just big men. He's sending lots of different players, especially guards in, where we'll yet to see that other than Jalen Hood-Schifino, but although Indiana has one on the boards now, but we'll see. But I don't know that what it is that draws a kid to there. Is it can't just be the national championships. It's how they feel that either they fit into the offense or that they can shine more or whatever it is, but there's a reason that they pick who they pick.
Yeah, in some cases, it could be financial. I don't know what the offer would be from UConn. I don't know what the offer would be from Indiana. There's just they might be identical, and he may just be choosing based on how he felt when he was on each campus. It's everybody's taste in colleges is a little bit different. There are kids who would love to be in a city type campus. My personal thing, I don't know how everybody who gets an offer to UCLA doesn't go there because it's the most beautiful campus I've ever been on. And the weather is incredible.
I turn on, he says, I turn on Sunset Boulevard every day to drive to work.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty good point to make.
It's all individual tastes, Jim. And and that's what makes college basketball great is that all these young people have something a little different that they want. And so therefore we have a lot of different competitors that can be significant. And so that's what makes it special. And it makes it possible for us to have so many different teams be outstanding in a year. And of course, the nature of the tournament itself as well. And so that's what makes the game great. And there was a lot of consternation in the last week about Tony Bennett walking away from college basketball immediately. And there were some of my competitors, colleagues, whatever you want to call them, at other national sites, the blow to college basketball. Hey, look, John Wooden retired. We still got a game. Mike Krzyzewski retired during my career, 2022. We still got a game. The sport moves on. Bob Knight, what he did for IU, the sport continues to go. It's just why you would call it a blow to college basketball for one coach to decide it's not for him anymore. It's not a blow. It's a blow to Virginia because he's fantastic and they're going to win more games with him than without him. It's a blow to UVA, no doubt. Their basketball program, the university is going to be fine, but the basketball program, it's a blow to them. It is not a blow to college basketball. College basketball has survived not only the departure of Wooden, Krzyzewski, Dean Smith, etc., but they lose every 4 years, or now more often. I mean, they lost Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and then Michael Jordan and Larry Bird, and it continued to go because it's self-sustaining. It regenerates itself. So this sport has great resilience, and it's going to continue to do that. And the way I look at it is, if it wasn't, if these changes weren't for Tony, more power to him. Go do what you want to do with your life. Now, because of some changes that were made in the previous 15 years, you can afford it. You can do whatever you want. He made in the last 11 years, I think it was, minimum of $38 million. He's got plenty of money. If he doesn't want to do this anymore, there's lots of things he can do, and he'll do them well.
Yeah, and I don't know, is it disingenuous to put this on the changes when everybody else has to do it? It
isn't disingenuous because, if the person decides that this is not for him or her, depending on which sport and what coach, if the person decides it's not for them, well, that's fine. Because it's not for you. But it is disingenuous to say these changes, for others to say these changes are untenable. I wrote a column that basically said, okay, he doesn't want to deal with these changes. Okay, it's hard. It has gone from a job that had very little downtime and and that constant recruiting calendar and then the coaching part and all that, to being all consuming. Now you have to constantly be involved in roster preservation and roster extension and all of that. You have to be. It's very challenging for a college coach in ways that it wasn't even 7 or 8 years ago. So I get not wanting to do that anymore. But where I drew the line was in 2009, and I remember this distinctly. And I didn't write about it at the time because we were very siloed, and I was college basketball and this was a college football coach. But when Texas decided that Mack Brown at $3 million a year wasn't making enough money, and they gave him $5 million a year, I knew everything had changed at that point, that money would now define a lot of what happened in college sports in a way that it hadn't in the earlier years of my career. I knew everything was going to be different. But because it did, Jim, that's what led to Tony Bennett, instead of making $1 million a year, $1.5 million or whatever, and change year after year after year. So if you excel as he did, you bank, as I said, nearly $40 million during the last a dozen or so years of his career at Virginia. That's a totally different financial place to be than even having made $1 million a year during that time. He has wealth that he'll never spend. And so if there are other things he wants to do, then he can do them. It's so disingenuous. This is where that word comes up, to say that everybody's leaving. When first of all, Nick Saban was over 70. Mike Krzyzewski was 75. Roy Williams was 70. That's not an unnatural time to retire. It's extraordinary to work that long. Yeah. And the second part of that is people that are still in the game. Leonard Hamilton is 76. Jim Larinaga is like 73. Coach Calipari is about 67 now. You see all these guys. Mark Few is going to be 62 soon. All these guys are older. Tom Izzo is going to be 70 this season. And so it's not chasing everybody away. It's chasing the people away who decided they didn't want to do it anymore. And when I wrote that column last Thursday or Friday, I got a lot of comments from coaches who thanked me for pointing out that it's, the game is fine. The game, that everybody's not leaving. It's individuals who decide that they don't want to do it anymore, and the game will survive and thrive.
We've got to take a quick break. Mike Decourcy from the Sporting News is with us here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio, brought to you by our good friends at the Hard Truth Distilling Company. We're back with more right after this.